Every game evolves during development, but few transformations are as drastic as Borderlands is. Going from a dark, gritty sci-fi FPS to the bold, stylized looter shooter we know today. Over the past few months, I've been covering the concept art of every Vault Hunter you voted for. And in this video, I've compiled, remastered, and updated that series to focus on the game that started it all. We're going to be talking about the OG4, Mordecai, Roland, Lilith, and Brick, and see how their early designs helped shape the characters that defined the series. Real quick, the support across both YouTube and TikTok has been insane. Subscribing and following allows me to dig into more cool stuff like this, and it's totally free to do. It might not seem like much, but it is huge for me. Genuinely, thank you. With that said, let's get into it. Part Mordecai. Everyone's favorite Truxican bird enthusiast and sharpshooter, Mordecai is the Borderlands series' premier sniper. While that core idea stuck around since the very beginning, there are a few key differences between early Mordecai and modern Mordecai. In the original story, Mordecai was supposed to be on Pandora searching for someone named Quinn. After discovering Quinn died, his journey would shift to finding out what Quinn was carrying. He was also intended to team up with an alien companion, obviously an early version of Bloodwing. One recurring comment about Mordecai's appearance, however, is his weight, which is often the punchline to multiple jokes. But did you know in the early development of Borderlands 1, Mordecai was actually a bit more fit? Since then, he went through a couple redesigns, and one of his models was even recycled for the final game in the form of Reaver, a boss you face around level 25. We've also never seen Mordecai's entire face due to his mask and goggles, but if we go back to this concept art here, we actually get a rare look at what his face might have looked like. And as you can see, he's got some brownish blonde dreads, teal eyes, multiple scars, and some sort of monocle. And yeah, honestly, I'm glad they dropped this. In Borderlands 2, Mordecai is meant to look the most fallen off of the original 4 Vault Hunters, with his scruffier beard and weathered clothing due to the events he's endured leading up to and during the events of Borderlands 2. But for Borderlands 3, we get a couple new design concepts, seemingly trying to blend both his 1 and 2 designs, but in the end, it leans more towards his classic look, showing us his growth and how he's embraced the best version of himself moving forward. And surprisingly, we get another new look at what might be his face. A very different look, but it does line up more with how I've envisioned him all this time. And I just gotta say, dude's got a fucking beak of his own, you know what I mean? Part Roland. Originally from Promethea, Roland is a former soldier of the Crimson Lance, the highly trained private military of the Atlas Corporation. He became the de facto leader of the Crimson Raiders in Borderlands 2 and is generally considered a beloved character across the Borderlands community. But did you know that before Roland looked like this, he actually looked like this, and that it was almost a last-minute change? Infamously, the first Borderlands game went through an 11th hour shift in both style and tone, and that included a major redesign of its playable characters. While Roland's backstory as a former member of Atlas's Crimson Lance stuck around, there was also going to be a subplot involving a 10-year grudge reigniting when the Brigadier's leader was rumored to have the same name as a man Roland once swore to kill. We know the Brigadiers ended up becoming Pandora's bandits, and while we don't know for sure who this leader was meant to be, I personally am a firm believer that this was an early version of Baron Flint. Visually, early Roland comes across as another generic, tough white guy, typical of games from the 2000s and early 2010s. The only real thing he's got going for him is a string of numbers embedded on the side of his head. If I had to make another guess, I'd say this was meant to be some kind of inmate ID number. Maybe he was part of Dahl's prisoner workforce, branded this way to keep him in check. This could have also inspired the later design of Dahl soldiers having their ranks embedded in their foreheads, as seen with Axton in Borderlands 2. In an early in-game screenshot, we see him with a fuller head of hair as well as some sideburns. We also see what looks like a red star on his left shoulder pad, which makes me think of Vladoff. It is worth noting that this design bears quite a few similarities with Dr. Zed, so it is possible they ended up repurposing this design for him. As for why they made him black in the final design, well, it's because black don't crack. Part Lilith. The very first siren we're ever introduced to, Lilith is one of the most important characters in Borderlands. She's had to step up as a leader more than once, and even though opinions on her have been relatively mixed recently, she's still conceptually a pretty cool character. But her earliest concepts looked nothing like the Firehawk we know today. In fact, one of the very first drafts gave us her full name, Dr. Lilith Cashling. This early character bio actually described Lilith as a mercenary scientist, with no mention of her her mystical powers or tattoos, which makes it pretty clear she wasn't originally designed with her siren identity in mind. What ties this all together is actually her clothing. What little we can see looks almost identical to what Tannis wears in the final game, so it seems that Lilith's earliest concept directly evolved into the character of Dr. Patricia Tannis. But it doesn't stop there, because another one of her earliest designs was this woman. For this concept, she would have had two distinct forms: her regular appearance with her pale skin, yellow eyes, and long braided white hair. But in combat, she would transform into this, her pupils turning pitch black and dark veins spreading across her face. And apparently some of the key inspirations for Lilith's personality and design here were Trinity from The Matrix and River from Firefly. And as you could probably tell, much like Tannis, this design wouldn't go to waste either, because it was repurposed into Commandant Steele, the main villain of the first Borderlands. Interestingly, there's also this early concept art of a woman wearing Steele's exact clothing, which may suggest this could also be an early concept for Lilith, though that's unconfirmed. By the time Borderlands 2 rolled around, her siren powers had grown so much stronger that they literally tore through her clothing. Her spikier hair and torn vest around her waist suggests she's gained a bit more edge since her last appearance. For Borderlands 3, her outfit kind of seems like a callback to her Borderlands 1 design, though refined with some extra straps, pads, and pouches. Apparently the team experimented with showing more of her age and wisdom, but those were scrapped for altering her proportions too much, which is a shame, because with bolder design choices, and better writing of course, her role as both a leader and the face of the Crimson Raiders could have been even sharper. Part Brick. Brick the Berserker stands out from his fellow Vault Hunters in Borderlands 1 in more ways than one. Trading subtlety for hulking brute force, Brick is a massive unit who would rather punch first and ask questions never. But what makes Brick especially interesting is how his conceptual origins differ from the rest of the cast. As you may know by now, the first Borderlands was initially pitched with a darker, grittier art style before Gearbox made their infamous last-minute stylistic shift. Roland, Mordecai, and Lilith were all designed under that original look, and it had to be reworked to fit the new tone. Brick, however, is the exception. He wasn't even considered as a playable Vault Hunter until after the game's overhaul, which means he's the only one of the original four designed exclusively with this new direction in mind. In RPG terms, Roland is the soldier / all-rounder, Mordecai the ranged hunter, Lilith the mage, and for Brick, he was added later on in development to fill the missing tank class. One idea they had for Brick was that he would actually enter his berserk rage through the use of hard drugs. While there aren't any visuals, apparently the devs toyed with experimental UI designs that would visualize his skill trees with beakers and IV bags. This was obviously cut. By Borderlands 2, Brick changed very little. He started wearing both a bolt-lined vest and a pair of gauntlets, plus somehow obtaining a massive open wound gash in his right arm. His belt buckle also lost its Elvis Presley taking care of business reference that was present in the first game. And again, in Borderlands 3, the changes were slightly less minimal, but still. This time he drops the vest and gets a new bandana and another gash in his shoulder, all while sporting the B-Team logo, the crew he hangs with, which is composed of Mordecai and Tiny Tina. But across all three games, one small detail ties his designs together: the dog paws around his neck. In Brick's backstory, he had a beloved pet dog, Priscilla, and over time, the developers have tortured Brick as different dogs of his have met some pretty grim fates in between each game. One of them, according to the lore, was even killed in front of him by Nisha, the sheriff of Lynchwood and a playable Vault Hunter in the pre-sequel. Looking back, it's wild how much these characters transformed, not just during development, but throughout the entire Borderlands saga. And it's unreal how close we came to a totally different cast of Vault Hunters. But that's gonna wrap this up. Thank you for watching, stay safe, stay sly, goodbye.